Let's talk about your pelvis. The pelvis is your center of gravity, and right in the middle, if I were to put a ball right here at what we call S2, that would be truly when you stand your center of gravity in an ideal placement. But because most of us are, you guys remember from the course, stuck in a tuck, a lot of us from the chronic habit of sitting, what it's doing is it's shortening the fascia on the front side of the body, shortening hip flexors and destabilizing the front of the lumbar spine. On the back side, the muscles of the deep paraspinal muscles, multifidus, erector spinae, and even quadratus lumborum are always on a constant line of tension. And then of course, we don't really just tuck, we kind of side bend, so one QL is even going to get a little bit short as it attaches to the inside of the ilia. Causes all sorts of problems. You go to stand up, body's not really prepared to move, and so we get stuck in a tuck. And the center of gravity is no longer, your brain never really perceives it as being in the front of our body. Instead, you're kind of in that deviated posture, your hips are a little forward and tucked under. That's going to transition your center of gravity more to the lumbar spine, and you can't really have the center of gravity in a space because a space needs the stability of the masses so that your spaces can move efficiently and vice versa. You need to have stability in the spaces so that you can move your masses efficiently. So if your center of gravity is not truly being acquired in a mass, the spaces are more susceptible to compression and you get unnecessary tension in those big spaces. So we want to alleviate that. So let's talk about the anatomy of the pelvis. So if you don't have a lot of anatomy, there's actually a lot to know. This is your lumbar spine, and you've got your discs and the facets. These are called your transverse processes, and then on the back side the bones are your spinous processes, and these are the ilias. This is the iliac crest. These big bones are the ilias themselves, and on the front of it is called the ASIS, the anterior superior iliac spine, but just underneath it is the anterior inferior iliac spine, and that is going to be a real key landmark when you guys go to do any of the lower body length, low back release techniques. That's going to be one of those places that you guys are going to practice on each other doing that hands-on palpation, because right behind this, if you set your hands up, and I'll show you that in a minute, you're definitely going to hit the roller on the other side ideally. So again, iliac crest, ASIS, AIIS, and then you've got your pubic bones and the pubic symphysis on the front side. This bone here is your greater trochanter, and then on the back side, you still have your ilias, but this bone here is called the ischium, and this is the ischial tuberosities. That's where your hamstrings attach. And again, here's your greater trochanter, the lesser trochanter, that's where psoas attaches. And then again, this is the head of your femur and the hip socket. So if you had a labral tear, it would be in this region here or onto the front. This whole region that would contain that is a bunch of fascia that would stabilize your joint. So again, these are the spinous processes, this is the transverse processes, this is your sacrum, your coccyx bone. Those are all the structures of your pelvis. So another thing to know on the pelvis itself is, again, placement of the pelvis when you guys are on the roller. So let's take a look at the positioning and how you guys are going to identify on each other and where I want you to learn to palpate, so that what you can do is identify if people are in a good position when they get up on the roller. What's very deceiving is that we don't look like a skeleton. We've got a whole bunch of flesh around our bodies, and some of us have got more body fat than other people. And so some people, their caboose, their butt's gonna look like it's hanging off the other side of the roller, and that actually might be okay. So what you have to really look at is, where is the pelvis in relationship to the roller, and being able to identify some of these landmarks, both on yourself, to be able to cue it, as well as to be able to palpate somebody, just to double check, because again, sometimes their own body is going to be deceiving, and you're going to think they're in the wrong place, and they might be in the right place. So let's take a look at the skeleton on a roller, and then I'll put myself on the roller, and we'll see if we can understand the difference between the two. So here's the position of the the skeleton on the roller. It's going to look a little bit different if you take a look at what my body looks like when I'm on the roller. Very different when you have a whole body on it. But what you want to just remember is that the iliac crest, top of the ilias, are going to be on the head side of the roller. The PSIS is right here, floating on the body side of the roller. It's not on the top of the roller. And the inferior superior iliac spine, remember you can try to palpate that anterior superior, that firm bony prominence. And then just beneath it, you've got the inferior iliac spine. And so if you run your hands down with your thumb there, you should hit the top of the roller. Another way you can tell is if you bring somebody's thigh up at that 90-degree angle. Of course, it looks very different with the skeleton than my body. When you add the flesh and the body to the bones, you can kind of see how the whole thigh looks like. It's pretty relative to the top of the roller. And then if you really wanted to, you could also think about the crease of the hip is the same thing, is going to be in this relative area between the inferior superior iliac spine and the femoral head. That whole region should really look like it's relative to the top of the roller, and that's how you'll know if somebody's in the right place. And these are all great landmarks to reference so that you always have somebody in a good position on the top of the roller. The other thing that you want to remember about the pelvic bones is that there are no two pelvic bones that are quite alike. Some people have wide pelvic bones, some people it's narrow. Some people actually have two iliac bones that their ilias look like they are completely different shapes. Some people have one that's very wide and one that's narrow, but also structurally, actually two bones can be very different from left to right. And even if we take a look overhead at our skeleton, the skeleton has got two very differently shaped pelvic bones, and that's very common in real human bodies. So one final concept I want to talk about is differentiation. And the reason I use the word differentiate instead of isolate is actually pretty specific. Isolation is about separating things and isolating it to a place. And that's very different than what we want to do. I'm not really even focusing on what's moving. I'm focusing on other areas and what's staying stable as we move a specific mass. That's called differentiation. So it's really about how things connect to remain stable and efficient. So when you move your pelvis, you're focusing on what's staying stable in the other masses. So ensuring that the ribs and the head stay stable as you move your pelvis, that you're not using your glutes or pushing into your legs or moving your thoracic vertebra, but just trying to acquire that subtle differentiated motion in the pelvis. Now that's very similar to when you're doing the rib length. You are trying to stabilize your pelvis in a tuck and keep your hip position the same as you just move your ribs. So differentiation is about, again, what's staying stable as you move a singular mass. So try to use that language as you're trying to share these techniques with each other. And I hope that this tutorial on the pelvis has helped you guys to identify those specific landmarks, whether you're using the bony landmarks or you're using the thigh. Or other ways to identify proper placement. The most important thing is that the roller is not on the low back and it's not so low that it would roll out from under us. So have fun in this part of your training and happy melting.